Welcome to the Mac's Future Weekly Podcast. All Apple talk and no chit chat.
Okay, welcome to the Apple Podcast. This is Lex at MacsFuture.com. Today is February 11th, 2012. This is episode 105 of the Apple Podcast. We have a lot of news, a lot of stuff to talk about. Remember, this is a chit-chat-free podcast, commercial-free on audio, and you can support it by giving it any sort of positive reviews in the iTunes podcast feed, or on YouTube, where the videos are, or on Blip TV, or go to MacsFuture.com and check out this stuff there. So let's get to it, episode 105. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the amazing week Apple had in terms of its stock price. Well, Apple started off the week, I guess its stock price was, let's see, around $464, $459 actually. And remember what happened, I think, recently was that Apple had just a crazy quarter results for the quarter ending December 31st. Just incredible profit, incredible growth. Consistent with past incredible growth, incredible profit, but just really climbing. And then, I don't know, something happened this week, and Apple stock surged even more. And it started off the week at about $459 Monday, then it climbed, and then on Tuesday, it was up at, like, by the end of the day, it was at $469, and then Wednesday, it climbed to $476, and then Thursday, it went from 476 all the way up, just kissing 500. It went to 495, and then so Thursday and Friday, at one point I think it hit 497. Its actual all-time high is 497.62. So this is an incredible rise, but then again it reflects that Apple's profit has just been growing incredibly. Apple's PE ratio, which is the price over earnings, is still kind of low at 14. And, I think it's going to soon reach $500 a share. I mean, I can't make price predictions. Apple stock could plummet. You could lose all your money if you invest in Apple. It could go either direction. The market is a risky thing. Don't invest in stocks unless you really know what you're doing. So when I say Apple could go to 500, also Apple could theoretically go down. Anything could happen if there's a crisis in the Middle East, if there's a crisis in the country. I don't know. What if China said tomorrow, you know what, Apple, we're not going to let you sell anything in China anymore. That would be devastating for Apple. But that being said, if everything sort of remains calm the way it is, Apple could continue just growing its stock price and growing its revenue. Now, to give you a sense of just how massive this is, Apple's market cap, in other words, what the market thinks Apple is worth as a company, is $460 billion, okay? Now, it's the most valuable public company in the world. To give you a sense how big that is, Exxon, which it passed, is, let's see, ExxonMobil, I said 460. Exxon's at 396. So Apple is now worth $60 billion more than Exxon. It gets even weirder. Let's take Microsoft. Remember Microsoft, Apple's nemesis for many years? Apple's nemesis is at $255 billion. So Apple at $460 billion is more than $200 billion worth more than Microsoft as a whole. Can you imagine that? Could you imagine that? Like back in the, in the 90s when Apple was like on the ropes and had to borrow $400 million or something like that from or get an investment from Microsoft. So, and somebody pointed out, okay, so Microsoft's market cap is 255. Let's take a look at Google. Google, which is now sort of an enemy of Apple's, is at 197. So that means if Microsoft's at 255 and 197, let's round that to 200. So that means it's 455 and we said 460 for Apple. That means Apple's now worth more than Google and Microsoft combined as companies. So that's pretty amazing. This little company that we used to be a little company that we love is now just like this colossal. It's a colossal company, and we'll have to see if it can continue creating great products, cranking out great stuff, and just being very innovative. Because that's why I like Apple, is because they just have delivered great products. So we'll have to see. So Apple continues to make inroads in the education market, and one of the more interesting things came out in something I read in Macnn.com, came out on Friday, February 10th. And apparently Apple has a special deal for schools regarding the Mac Air, the MacBook Air. It says here that Apple is now selling a special scaled-back 13-inch MacBook Air to schools, according to a report. And it says that the model is set to have the same internal specs as the standard 11-inch Air, including a 1.6 gigahertz Core i5 processor, 2 gigabytes of RAM, and 64 gigabytes of flash storage. And so it's apparently limited to schools buying in bulk, and you get a price of about $1,000 per system, or $4,995 for a group. And it says here a regular 13-inch Air would normally cost $1,299. So they're getting like a 30% discount on each MacBook Air. Now the other news that sort of coincides with that is Apple has discontinued the white MacBook Air. This is also in Macnn, and Apple has recently started informing resellers that the white MacBook Air, which has only been available in the education market, is being discontinued. And that was also a $999 computer. And it makes sense. I mean, if you're a kid or in a school, wouldn't you rather have a 13-inch MacBook Air than a old-fashioned white MacBook? I mean, the difference is you'll probably, with the old white MacBook, you could put a big hard drive in there and get a lot of storage, while the MacBook Air there's only a flash drive or an SSD drive for storage. But that's the future. The MacBook Air is just an incredibly great computer. I love it. I have an 11-inch one, and to me, it's my baby after the iMac that I have. So the two interesting pieces of news on the education front. Goodbye to the MacBook, white MacBook, the old-fashioned one, and welcome a sort of a 13-inch education MacBook Air. Very, I think this is a great development for schools. Speaking of MacBook Airs, one of the more exciting pieces of news that came out this week, something I read at MacRumors.com, a great website, is a report that that Apple is going to come out with a completely revamped MacBook Pro line, and that the MacBook Pro, and I guess they got this from AppleInsider.com, that the MacBook Pro will essentially go the way of the MacBook Air, and that it's going to have a design like the MacBook Air. And they're quoting Apple Insider here. They're saying, this will include new ultra-thin unibody enclosures that jettison yesteryear technologies like optical disk drives and traditional hard drives in favor of models with lightweight chassis that employ flash memory-based solid-state drives, instant-on capabilities, extended battery life, and rely on digital distribution for software and media. And according to the source, it says they're all going to look like MacBook Airs. So it's interesting, I wonder how they're going to differentiate things, because we currently have a 13-inch MacBook Air and an 11-inch MacBook Air, and there's a 13-inch MacBook Pro and a 15-inch MacBook Pro and a 17-inch MacBook Pro. Are we still going to have something called a Pro? Because, if the 15-inch MacBook Pro becomes like an Air, then isn't it just a MacBook Air? And maybe they'll get rid of the whole MacBook Pro line and just have MacBook Airs. all up the line from 11-inch to 13-inch to 15-inch to even 17-inch. So I don't know. I mean, how would you differentiate a Pro MacBook Air from a non-Pro MacBook Air? Let's say there's a 13-inch MacBook Pro, MacBook Air Pro. What would you do to it? I don't know. I mean, right now, in terms of connections, you have USB drive, you have USB connections and Thunderbolt in the MacBook Air as well. The MacBook Pros have FireWire, USB, Ethernet, and Thunderbolt. So I'm not sure how you would distinguish it. So clearly they're going to come out with a 15-inch model. It says here they're also working on a 17-inch. I think they're just going to be all MacBook Airs because I can't think of a way to really differentiate. Yeah, you could add more RAM in, you could add bigger SSD drives, but why wouldn't that be just one of the, the things that you can do to customize your MacBook Air? You wouldn't, when you call something different like a MacBook Pro, it usually has things that the lesser model can't customize into, so I think it totally makes sense business-wise because the MacBook Air has been just the powerhouse Mac seller in the Mac line. In the Macintosh line is actually now a much smaller part of Apple's revenue compared to iPhones. And even the iPad now, I think, is making as much money, if not more, than the MacBook Air. Okay, let's move on from the MacBook Air to the iPad. Well, remember last year, I think it was March 11th that the iPad 2 started selling, and they announced it I think a week before. Well, we're getting to that time again, and the Wall Street Journal's AllThingsD.com, John Paxkowitski, I think that's his name, had an article out on February 9th entitled, Apple to Announce iPad 3 First Week in March, which is coming up. We're in almost mid-February. And so he basically said, and Wall Street Journal has been historically a great leak area for Apple. Apple tends to trust the Wall Street Journal and leak stuff to the Wall Street Journal or give stuff to the Wall Street Journal as an exclusive. And it basically says Apple's not holding any event in February, but it is holding one in March to launch the next iPad. And it says here, sources say the company has chosen the first week in March to debut the successor to the iPad 2 and will do so at an event held at the San Francisco, probably the Yoruba Boina Center. And, so it says here, as for the next generation, the sources say it will be pretty much what we've been led to expect by the innumerable reports leading up to its release, a device similar in form factor to the iPad 2, but running a much faster chip, sporting an improved graphics processing unit, and featuring a 2048 x 1536 Retina display or something close to it. And it goes on to say, if 2011 was the year of the iPad 2, will 2012 be the year of the iPad 3? That's what the source said. So basically, we're seeing a newer iPad 3 coming in a matter of weeks, and I'm really excited. Now, let's see here. Hold on a second. So that I think this was corroborated by THELOOP, which is that other website that's very connected to Apple, who just said that, that the claim by AllThingsD is correct. So, I'm excited by it. Now, the New York Times Bits column sort of corroborated what AllThingsD said. They had an article out on February 9th, in which they pretty much confirmed, again, what AllThingsD said. The key part of the New York Times article is that they said An Apple employee said that the version of the new iPad that is being tested inside the company, quote, is essentially the same size and shape as the iPad 2, end quote, with an improved and, quote, truly amazing, end quote, screen. The tablet will include a faster processor, said the employee, who did not want to be identified because Apple's not fond of leaks. So this is from a source within Apple. At least the New York Times basically says it's an employee of Apple. So now on some other site, I had read something that it might be a tinge thicker, like a tinge thicker than the iPad 2. And I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. I mean, what would be really great if they did something wild and had a Thunderbolt connection, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're just going to, the iPad 2 has done so well. I think they're going to keep it looking pretty much like the iPad 2 and just have this incredibly new screen and faster processor. And I bet you it's going to have Siri in it. Siri is a great feature. I think I said this before. Like, I use Siri so much on my iPhone 4S that I forget that the iPad 2 does not have Siri. And I'm often trying to use Siri on the iPad 2, or do voice dictation, and it's not there. So I bet you that's going to be part of it too. So it's going to be very exciting. I think it's going to be the first week of March. Now, what am I going to do? I'm definitely going to buy the iPad 3. I bought the original iPad 1, sold it right after I bought the iPad 2, and I'm probably going to sell the iPad 2 right after I buy the iPad 3. These are just great devices that keep getting better with each iteration. So it's very exciting to see what's going to come out in a matter of probably less than a month. Now, there are signs definitely that the iPad 2 is coming. 9to5Mac, another great Apple tracking site, says a story out today, February 11th. It says, iPad 3 incoming, Wi-Fi and 3G iPad 2 models facing supply constraints in shortages at major retailers. So that's a sign that Apple's clearing out the inventory and getting ready for the iPad 3. And it says, according to a source familiar with Apple's product distribution channels, the iPad 2 Wi-Fi and 3G is constrained. That's the higher-end model that has also 3G. It says supply shortages span beyond Apple's own distribution channels, it says, as major retailers are reporting out-of-stock status for the 3G iPad 2. It says that a company called Carphone Warehouse in Orange and UK are reporting shortages. It says, now, that's interesting. Let's go to the Apple's website and see what's going on there. I'm going to go over to Apple's website, and I'm going to click on iPad. Now, let's go to the store. Let's go to the store and click on iPad, and let's see what happens to the iPad. I'm going to select an iPad 2. Let's pick white, and let's pick the 3G model, 64 gigabytes. It says it's in stock. Choose a carrier, AT&T. Well, on Apple's website, it's not sold out. So it could be that it's just in low stock in some of these other, avenues of selling, other retailers. So, but that's clearly a sign that I think the iPad 3 is coming. Okay, so another sign that the iPad 3 is coming is a story in Cult of Mac, which is another website that I like. Here it is, cultofmac.com. And there's a story that says AT&T introduces LTE micro SIMs you may need for iPad 3. And this is a great observation. And so apparently AT&T has started replacing existing micro SIMs with a new card capable of connecting to LTE network. And it says while you won't need to replace the micro SIM you've got in your phone, you may need one for your iPad 3 next month. And it makes a good point. The iPad 3 could be the first Apple device with what's known as 4G, which is LTE, cell phone data connection, which is supposed to be much faster. And one reason you could see LTE in the iPad 3 is that, people have been complaining that the problem with LTE, which is 4G data, is that it's a battery hog, and there are these 4G phones on Android phones. Samsung makes them on, Verizon and AT&T, and they really suck the battery. And it could be that, look, the iPad just has this massive battery, really long-lasting battery, and so maybe LTE will work better with the iPad at the beginning because it's not going to drain the battery the same way it would an iPhone. So it could be that AT&T is introducing these LTE micro SIMs because there's going to be a whole bunch of iPads that are going to take an LTE micro SIM. So that's kind of exciting, I think. Although, here's the weird thing. Why would they be selling micro SIMs LTE for the iPad? Because the current 3G iPad on with AT&T, you can't take the SIM out. The SIM is in the iPad. It comes with 3G. It's not like you replace the SIM. I think that's the case. I don't know. Let me go check my iPad. Hold on a second. No, sorry. I checked, and the iPad 3G, the iPad 2 with the 3G does, for AT&T, have like a SIM card that you can take out on the side. So it does make sense then that AT&T is selling a SIM card for LTE, because maybe it could be removed and put in an iPad 3. So that's another good sign. That would be a great feature, because you can use a lot of data on a cell phone with an iPad, and so why not have a faster connection? So that'll be a great feature to look for. Now, Cult of Mac had an interesting story that really points out how spectacular the new iPad 3 screen could be. And they're saying, for example, that everyone's been saying that the new iPad 3 could have a Retina display of 2048 times 1536 pixels. And Cult of Mac basically points out that that would be more pixels than most Macs. And for example, in the chart that they have, the iPhone 1 had 480 times 230 pixels. The iPhone 4 and 4S has 960 times 640. The iPad 1 and 2 has 1024 times 768. And full Blu-ray is 1920 by 1080. So this would be even higher than full Blu-ray. And it's according to Cult of Mac, it says the chart above came from Cloner, but Paul Horowitz over at OSX Daily raises an interesting point that Retina Display iPad 3 will make an interesting challenge for developers who will be designing their apps on Macs that will very likely have an inferior resolution to the tablet they're building. So their point is that the Macs have lower resolutions than 1048 by 1536. And let's take a look. Let's go to the Apple website, to the Macs, and let's look at some specs here. So let's take the iMac. Okay, the iMac tech specs. Here we go. The tech specs for the iMac. What do we got in terms of? Okay, so the 27-inch iMac is 2,560 by 1440. 2,560 by 1440. 2,000. So the Retina display will be 2,048. So on one hand, in the width, there'll be more pixels, but in the height, they'd be less. So it's not really the 27-inch one is going to be very close to the iPad resolution. It's the 21-inch one that's not going to be close to the iPad. That one is, the 21-inch iMac is 1920 by 1080. Interesting. Let's take a look at the MacBooks. So let's see, the MacBook Pro line. Let's take a look at their tech specs. They are in terms of screen. Let's take a look at their screen. Okay, so it goes up to let's do the 17-inch. The 17-inch is 1920 by 1200 native. So that's less. And the 15-inch is 1440 by 900 native. So really, we're talking about the MacBook Pro line is smaller pixels than the iPad. But the 27-inch iPad, so maybe they'll have to get like 27-inch iPads. I'm sorry, 27-inch iMacs to have a comparable resolution to the Retina Display screen of an iPad 2. Let's take a look at the MacBook Air. I'm sure the MacBook Air is not any higher resolution than the MacBook Pros. So what are their resolutions? Let's see. The 13-inch MacBook Air is 1440 by 900 native, and the 11-inch is 1344 by 756. So they make a good point. You know, unless Apple comes out with some sort of Retina Display MacBook Air, that'll be interesting. Maybe they'll do that. Maybe that'll be the Pro version of the MacBook Air. Hey, this is like a little intellectual breakthrough for me here, because I was trying to figure out how would Apple differentiate a MacBook Air Pro line from a regular MacBook Air line. One way to do it is have the Pro lines have really high resolution, expensive screens that can match the resolution of the Retina Display iPad. So that's my I don't know, that could be a prediction by me. Now, in the patent litigation front, in terms of Apple's battles in the patent litigation wars with its competitors, things are starting to get really ugly. Now, one of the interesting things is there's a story out in MacRumors, actually republishing something that the Dow Jones Newswire had, that Apple filed a letter with the European Telecommunications Standard Institute last November pushing for clarification on how standards essential patents are intended to be licensed. And this has to do with something known as FRAND patents. So what does that mean? Well, what are FRAND patents? FRAND patents are patents that are required to be licensed under fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms in order to promote competition in the marketplace. So why does this matter? Because if you've been following these battles, I've been sort of watching some of the blogs that follow the patent litigations. Motorola, which is going to be acquired by Google, sort of scored some points against Apple in one of the patent battles in Germany. And Apple recently was required to briefly pull all 3G capable iOS devices, with the exception of the iPhone 4S, from its German online store last week in the wake of a victory by Motorola Mobility. And the injunction was quickly suspended pending Apple's appeal of the ruling. Apple argued now that the patents in question are subject to FRAND licensing requirements, and Motorola was claiming that it wanted a 2.5% license fee for the patent, and which would then have gotten Motorola like $1 billion from Apple in 2001. So why do I discuss this? Because I think a lot of people don't understand. I'm on Google Plus, and some people somebody was reporting how this is really cynical of Google. Google was complaining about abusive patents, and yet it's going out through its proxy, Motorola, which it's acquiring, and abusing FRAND patents. And some of the people in Google Plus were like, well, Apple's abusing patents by patenting, you know, all sorts of easy stuff. And so what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But the point that I was trying to make is, wait a second, these are FRAND patents. And people on Google Plus who were like commenting on some, I don't know, story didn't understand that FRAND patents are sort of untouchable. You're not supposed to abuse those. And so let me just tell you from a layman's perspective, what is a FRAND patent? A FRAND patent is, you know, if you're a big company and you're creating a standard in the industry and want other people to adopt it, you agree as part of some standard setting agreement that the patent you have, you're going to not abuse, that you're going to license it to people at fair and reasonable terms. And my understanding is Motorola's patents here concern cellular chips. You know, they were at the beginning of the whole cellular phone industry, so it's not like the design of the, you know, the interface. We're talking about the actual chips that make the communication, the 3G, you know, communication. And Motorola was basically trying to use those FRAND patents and basically say to Apple, you know, we want 2.5%. And what Apple was saying, and I think they got support in writing to the standards body in Europe from Microsoft and other entities, is that, wait, that's an abuse. Because, and I was trying to explain to somebody on Google Plus, because apparently there's like 1,000 patents that are FRAND patents that involve cell phone data connection. So if each one of those charged 2.5%, that's way over 100%. That means anybody trying to make like a cell phone would make nothing. Would have to pay 100% of all revenue, actually like 1,000% of all revenue, to pay for all these licenses. Because yes, you can charge a little bit for these FRAND licenses, but 2.5% is a crazy percentage when there's like a whole bunch of these FRAND patents. So, anyways, so this was kind of disturbing that Google's gone down this path. I mean, I think Motorola is desperate. Remember, Google bought Motorola for its patents? Well, if the best patents that Motorola can use to fight Apple are just FRAND patents, then that's not really good for Motorola, because what Google needs are regular patents, because FRAND patents, and I think Motorola is going to lose on this, you can't abuse. And apparently the European regulatory authorities, I guess the antitrust people, are looking into the use not only by Motorola but maybe of Samsung of like using FRAND patents. Because you see, basically you don't have to join these standard setting groups, right? But from a business point of view, some companies want to join a standard setting group because they're hoping their standards becomes a universal standard. So Motorola in the early days wanted people to adopt their cellular standard so their cellular phones would work with other cellular phones or data connections. And so you can't have it both ways. You can't say your technology is going to be a standard setting and it's going to be subject to a FRAND patent and then later on use it to combat some other patent battles. Now, what's the difference? The patents that Apple is using are not FRAND patents. They didn't say, hey, this interface, we want to make a standard. No, Apple never joined some sort of standard setting institute for the interface. So, yeah, it's a very interesting development, and I think Motorola is going to lose. Now, in its defense of Motorola regarding this FRAND patent, Apple has another strategy which is very interesting. GigaOm, another great website, actually has the Apple blog, had another story about Apple now has filed suit in California against Motorola. And basically what Apple's saying is, look, the chips that are in the iPhones that Motorola is suing us about, those cell phone chips Apple got from Qualcomm, another American company. And so Apple, when it bought from Qualcomm, it's presumably protected regarding those chips. And Apple pointed out that Qualcomm licensed those chips from Motorola. So Motorola can't sue Apple because Apple bought these from Qualcomm and Qualcomm licensed them. So this is what they have in the complaint, Apple. Motorola's German lawsuit. So anyways, so Apple went into court in California and wants the court to stop Motorola from going overseas and suing Apple, saying this cell phone chip patent of Motorola's was violated by Apple, the one that Apple got from Qualcomm. And so some people on the internet were like, well, how can Apple do that? How can Apple go to an American court and ask an American court to stop, an overseas court from granting Motorola's like injunctions against Apple? And what people miss is this: Motorola is based in the United States, Apple's based in the United States, and Qualcomm's based in the United States. So Apple can go to a court in the United States, and that court will have jurisdiction over Motorola because Motorola is right here. And so Apple's going and saying, look, Motorola is not honoring its license with Qualcomm that benefits Apple and is trying to make mischief overseas. Well, a court here could direct Motorola to stop making mischief overseas. The court here wouldn't rule over like a court in overseas, but it can say to Motorola, we have rights over you, the court, and Motorola, you can't go overseas and start making mischief in violation of this license agreement with Qualcomm, and that benefits Apple. So I think it's a good strategy on Apple's part. I think what Motorola is doing, again, is a sign of desperation. Google paid all this money for Motorola's licenses and patents, and if this is the best that Motorola can come up with, to combat Apple's claims that Android is violating all sorts of Apple patents, and it's pretty desperate, I think. Now let's talk about the iPhone a little bit. TheLoop.com has an interesting story. BlackBerry's been just dying left and right. Its stock has been plummeting. Apple has been making huge inroads against BlackBerry with the iPhone 4S and other iPhones. And now comes a story that, in the enterprise space, Apple's making inroads, particularly with the iPhone and the iPad. TheLoop.com has a story that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, I think that's a federal agency, is dumping RIM's BlackBerry from its list of officially supported mobile devices, according to a memo sent from the organization's CIO. And a memo was sent by Joseph Klimovitz, and it said that support for BlackBerry will continue until May 12th. And instead, it says that the government of that agency, the U.S. government, will instead supply workers with new iPhones and iPads. So that's huge that a federal government agency is doing that. And I think you're going to see more inroads in business with the iPhone and the iPad. I mean, one of the frustrating things, I have a BlackBerry where I work. One of the frustrating things with the BlackBerry is it's really just good for, I think, two things. Email, getting email and sending email, and maybe, quickly typing something into the calendar. But where it really stinks is in reviewing documents or surfing the web or using any other apps. There are some standard apps, but I never use them. So I think we're going to see more of this in terms of the iPhone as well as the iPad in the enterprise and business. Okay, so speaking of the iPhone, AT&T is doing a kind of a crappy thing. There's a story out in Electroniista that starting February 12th, which is tomorrow, AT&T's upgrade fee. This is like whenever you upgrade to a new phone, even if you're entitled to a full subsidy, AT&T, ever noticed they charge you like an $18 fee? Well, now they're bumping up the fee from $18 to $36. So Electroniista says a staff memo has leaked plans for AT&T to hike its device upgrade fee. And it says the cost was allegedly necessary because the, quote, the overall costs, end quote, for upgrading to a new device have gone up. The fee increases would take effect February 12th. So this is really kind of sleazy. I think it's just a revenue grab by AT&T. I mean, what kind of costs are associated with switching phones? I mean, all you're doing is taking a SIM card from one phone to another. You're switching SIM cards. So I'm really disappointed in AT&T. I got to tell you, I'm really thinking of switching from AT&T. I get really poor data, and I'm in New York City, and where I work in New York City, I'm in a very business area, and the data rates that I get on my iPhone 4S is a joke. It's a joke. I'm getting download speeds of 2 megabytes, 1 megabyte per second. It's always clogged up, and I think it's just horrific what AT&T is doing in terms of providing service. And this could be the final straw, having to pay $36 the next time I connect a new phone to it. Now, I have the iPhone 4S unlocked version. So what I did is I sold my old iPhone 4 and I got an iPhone 4S. I paid full price for it. I paid like, I don't know, $750 or whatever it costs for an unlocked iPhone. And I think it's worth it because, one, it comes unlocked. Apple unlocks the phone so you can use it with other carriers, so you don't have to jailbreak it to unlock it. So this has some resale value because I can sell it overseas or whatever, and I think it's going to sell easily for more money because of the fact that it's unlocked. But also you feel like, hey, you're not tied in to the carrier. Like I don't feel tied into AT&T. I'm pretty much done with my contract, and I can switch to Verizon. But the thing that I'm really looking for is when I really don't understand, unless the carriers are threatened by it, Apple should come out with a cell phone data iPod Touch, because the iPod Touch is really like an iPhone. And what if Apple made an iPod Touch that was had data connection? With all the voice over IP we have, why do we need a phone, like a real phone? Look, the iPad, let's say the iPad 3 has LTE, and I'm carrying that iPad 3 a lot, I could use that as a phone, with Google Voice or, all these sort of voice over IP apps. Anyways, shame on you, AT&T. Shame on you for raising the upgrade fee from $18 to $36. Shame on you. Now, you may have heard of Kickstarter. That's that website where people come up with projects, and if Kickstarter approves it, then people can raise money from people for their project. And usually how it's done is they say, I have a goal of raising X amount, and if I raise it, I'm going to be able to manufacture or do something with this money. And if they're manufacturing something, they'll say, look, if you contribute at least X, $10, $20, $30, $40, and I reach my goal and I make this device, you're going to get it, and then I'll sell it for more money to other people. So apparently a lot of people have been very successful. And recently, a couple of projects, we were able to raise over $1 million. And one of them really caught my eye. I think it was the first one to do it. It's a device that's coming out called the Elevation Dock, the best dock for the iPhone, and it's a very sort of clever dock. Now, in Kickstarter, the people behind it were only seeking to raise $75,000, and they've gotten instead pledges of $1 million, $464,706 from 12,521 backers, and all you had to do was pledge $59 for $59. So what is this Elevation dock? Apparently, the regular iPhone dock is kind of a pain because if you have a case, it doesn't really fit well. Well, this thing apparently fits very well. It has looks like it has like a little space, and so it can fit even with a case. And also, apparently, because it's in like this little space, it has better acoustics because the space creates sort of like a nice sound. So people seem to be raving about this device. Now, for $59, apparently, you get your own elevation dock in a glass bead blasted finish, like on Unibody Max, and they're saying it will later sell for $90. What else? For $79, you get that. Plus, you get a shielded line-level audio out plus USB power adapter, and that'll later sell for $120. And for $85, you get all that plus a black finish. And for $118, you get, let's see, what do? You get 2 matte black dock pluses and 1 sun orange limited edition dock. So they have all sorts of combinations, including you can pay more money and get one that's in lime green. You can get a multi-pack one. But it looks like a cool device. And it says here, if you have tried using docks for your iPhone, you have probably felt our frustration. Undocking is difficult. Many aren't designed to work with cases. They are lightweight and are generally made as cheap afterthought accessories. That's why we've designed the Elevation dock, simple to use, quick undocking, and it works with or without a case. So it looks kind of cool. It says it has, well, they show the picture of the undocking. They're showing a competitor one, and then they show the Elevation one. You just pull up the phone. It says no violent shaking or using 2 hands. It says even if there's a case or no case, it doesn't matter. It's designed to just work. There's apparently some clever movable support pad allows you to use the dock with or without a case. So, I don't know. I'm thinking of getting it. It looks like it'll match an iMac, and it'll help the acoustics. And it has a nice line out. So, then they show it with the plug. There's a USB charger. So anyways, you know, the cool thing about Kickstarter is there's a lot of like iPhone and iPad and Apple related efforts by third-party manufacturers or people who want to be manufacturers. So check it out. It's called the Elevation Dock, and I have a link on my blog. I'm sorry, for this podcast. So check it out. Okay, so one of the somewhat amusing things this week was apparently the FBI kept a file on Steve Jobs, and it was released this week. And according to All Things Digital, it's kind of ridiculous. So apparently Steve Jobs back in the early 90s was considered for a position on the president. This is then the first President Bush's export panel. I guess it's like you get some people from business. And they did a background check. And basically the FBI recently released its file on Jobs, compiled during a background check conducted in the 1990s. And, you know, there's just a couple of mundane stuff. It says here in the file, Jobs had a tendency to, quote, twist the truth and distort reality in order to achieve his goals, end quote. Yeah, well, it's the distorted reality thing of Steve Jobs. It goes on to say Jobs underwent, quote, a change in philosophy by participating in Eastern and/or Indian mysticism and religion. This change apparently influenced his personal life for the better, end quote. And it goes on to say Jobs was strong-willed, stubborn, hardworking, and driven, which is why he's so successful. It goes on to say Jobs likes to get his own way. Jobs was not a member of the Communist Party. Jobs did an outstanding job in the computer industry. So really, there's nothing really interesting here. We all know this. You know, Walter Isaacson's biography pretty much covered all of this. It says here that the FBI's only discovery of note was that Jobs was inexplicably granted top secret security clearance by the Defense Industrial Security Clearance Office between 1988 and 1990. And it says that these credentials were issued by Pixar. So maybe Pixar did some work for the government back then. They did have hardware computers that did animation. And so maybe these computers were very powerful. So, you know, there's not much there, but people I think were hoping to see something interesting in the FBI files regarding Steve Jobs. Okay, so I was recently in Barnes & Noble, and I got to play around with the Nook Color tablet, which is essentially like an Android tablet similar to the Kindle Fire with, some sort of proprietary Android on it. And, it's not really like an iPad. It's not as good as an iPad in terms of the user interface and the zippiness of the operating system. But I could see the appeal of like a 7-inch, 6.5-inch tablet like the Nook tablet or the Kindle Fire. And Cult of Mac's Mike Elgin has an interesting article, The Real Reasons Apple Will Ship a 7-inch iPad. And I think he makes good points. And he said, he seems to think they're going to do it. And he says, look, Samsung is going all out to promote the new, the new Galaxy Note, which is, I guess, small and easy to use. And I guess you use it with a pen. It's like a big phone with a pen. And he says that, that there is 3 classes of users who will be attracted to the big screen. First is the people who want a tablet, but one that fits in a pocket or purse and doesn't require a second purchase. And the second class, he says, is serious phone enthusiasts who download a lot of apps and ebooks and stuff who want a bigger screen. And the third is older people who struggle with normal-sized phones and the tiny screens. And so there is a market for this 7-inch type device. And I think that he's right. I think Apple will ship a 7-inch device. Now remember, Steve Jobs said 7 inches is too small. But Steve Jobs passed away, and I think Tim Cook is his own person, and I think Tim Cook is going to be somewhat more flexible in doing things, even where they said, Steve Jobs would take a position and say, no, we're never going to do this. And maybe it was harder for Steve Jobs because of his personality to really switch course. He did switch course in the past. I remember at one point he said, what's the point of having like video on the iPod, because who wants a small video screen? Then he eventually came out with video on the iPod. And what Eglin is saying is like, look, there is money to be made in this space regarding the smaller form of a tablet, whether it's a large phone that's 5 inches or 6 inches or a smaller phone. And so I think playing along with that Nook tablet, I could see Apple coming out with a 7-inch iPad. Wouldn't it be a shocker if Apple at its event in March says, yeah, we're going to have the iPad 3 and we're coming out with like some sort of souped up 7-inch tablet? That would really hurt Samsung. It would really hurt Amazon with the Kindle if there was something the same size. So I think it's possible, particularly if Apple can come around like the $200 price range or even $300 price range. So I think, Eglin makes some good points, and I think there is a possibility for a smaller iPad in the future of Apple's sales. Okay, so it looks like we're getting very close to a real Apple TV coming out. On the Globe and Mail.com, which is, I guess, a Canadian or British, I don't know, paper or something, but a story came out that Apple is developing a real TV, and it says here Canada's largest telecommunication companies are squaring off in a fight about the future of television. It says here that Rogers Communications and BC Inc. are in talks with Apple Inc. to become Canadian launch partners for its much-hyped Apple iTV. That's what they're calling it, a product that has the potential to revolutionize TV viewing by turning conventional televisions into gigantic iPads. And it says, while the iTV product remains cloaked in secrecy, sources say Cupertino-based Apple has approached Rogers and Bell as it's actively pursuing partnerships. So one source said here, they're not close to doing it with one company or doing it with two. They're looking for a partner. They're looking for someone with wireless and broadband capabilities. And it says here the product reportedly integrates Siri, Apple's voice recognition software, and that viewers are going to also be able to control the TV by voice or hand gestures, all from the comfort of a couch. And it goes on to say, and an on-screen keyboard, meanwhile, can also be activated in similar manner, allowing viewers to surf the web, conduct video chats, and use social media such as Twitter and Facebook, all without any physical interface. So this looks kind of interesting. So the question is, I could see, what really intrigued me was the hand gestures. That you could just sort of swipe your hands in the air and sort of control the TV. Now, the Siri makes sense. Siri on the iPhone 4S is amazing. I've used a jailbreak hack to do even more amazing things with Siri. And I could see Siri being a crucial function of the TV. Siri is definitely going to come to the iPad. If there's a real TV, I could see Siri being used. Now, the hand gestures are interesting, too. Apple does have competition from Microsoft with the Kinect. The Kinect is that thing you connect to the Xbox, and then I think using cameras and some other sensors, you sort of dance around in front of it, and you can control things and on the screen, and a sort of an avatar version of yourself appears on the Microsoft Xbox screen. So this sort of virtualization where there's going to be sensors seeing you move around and move your hand, I think that's coming. I'm sure Apple has taken apart Microsoft Kinect and figured out how it does its magic, and I bet you Apple's going to incorporate similar stuff like that into an Apple TV. So I think one site basically was saying, oh, an Apple TV is going to be like a 42-inch TV and be $1,500. I think Apple could make a decent profit at $1,500 because remember, a lot of LCD and plasma TVs, that are 42-inch go for $500 or $600 or $800. So, but I think a lot of people would pay a premium of $1,500 altogether for an Apple TV. If it could do magical things, if you could talk to it, and if it worked really well, because I think people are willing to pay a premium. That's Apple's entire product model, which is we don't care about selling to everybody, but we're interested in making something great that people are willing to pay a premium for. You're paying for the innovation, the cutting edge quality of the products. That's why people are paying for the iPhone and not, necessarily always going to Android. That's why people are buying the iPad. It's the innovation. So this is a really interesting story in the Globe Mail, and it would be great if a 42-inch true Apple TV comes out this year. Okay, so I thought I'd end the podcast talking about Siri. Siri is amazing, and I think I mentioned this maybe on the iPad podcast, but I jailbroke my iPhone 4S, and I expanded the powers of Siri using something that's a free jailbreak supplement to Siri called Assistant Extensions. And let's see if I can show you. It's free. You can donate, I guess, some money for it. And let's go to the website here. So basically, it can do kind of cool things. It says it's a tweak extending Siri. It allows you can open apps now with Siri. You can send tweets. You can turn off the SB settings toggles. You can talk with integrated chatbot and more. And so it's a very cool device. And the other cool thing is their website allows you, it has a tutorial using Xcode to make your own sort of supplements and hacks to Siri that you can then use with this extension. So this is in the Cydia store, which is the jailbreak store for the iPhone. Now, you have to jailbreak the iPhone, so don't do it unless you know what you're doing. Technically, Apple doesn't like you to jailbreak it. The Library of Congress said it's perfectly legal to jailbreak. And this is a very cool thing. So let me just show you. Like I'm gonna go to Siri. Let's chat. So the cool thing is you can see, it says just a moment please until I load my brain. So you can go into chat mode, which allows you to have a back and forth conversation with Siri. And I've done it a bit, and it's kind of fun. It's like your friend almost. So,
so much data.
It's saying there's so much data. So let's see. So what it's doing, it's loading the data. It needs to do the chat. And I'm not sure how they exactly do this, but they make it a little more lifelike that you're chatting with Siri.
There it is.
Okay, here we go. Let's see.
Okay, I am ready to stop chatting. Just say goodbye.
So basically, if you want to end it, you just say goodbye to stop chatting. Okay, so here we go. Siri, how you doing these days?
Tell me one of your favorite possessions.
I think my bicycle is my favorite possession, Siri.
Why? You must be very fond of it.
Yes, it's my prized possession. So it's sort of trying to figure out what to say now. I don't know, it's sort of stalling.
Have you ever been to Europe? Congratulations.
I've been to Europe. What's your favorite country in Europe, Siri?
Where were you to Europe? What is your favorite country? New York, Siri.
Okay, I think you're a little confused, Siri.
Yeah, okay. You believe that? It all makes sense to me right now.
Is something wrong, Siri?
I think so, but I'm not sure. Ask doubly aimless if it is.
Tell me a joke, Siri.
Did you hear the one about the mountain goats in the Andes? It was Baadi.
That's a bad joke, Siri.
What is so bad about it?
It wasn't funny, Siri.
It seemed like funny, Siri.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Gotcha.
Your feeling of superiority is only temporary.
That's not so good, is it, Siri?
Makes sense to me.
What's your favorite food, Siri?
I require only electricity.
What do you think is my favorite food?
You said it was Ghost in the Shell.
Ghost in the Shell is not a food.
When was this exactly?
What do you mean, when was this exactly?
I mean exactly what I said.
I think we're having difficulty communicating, Siri.
You believe that? In the universe we know.
How much of the universe do you know?
I require only minimal memory to have maximal conversations.
What's the best ice cream, Siri?
Vanilla.
Really? My favorite ice cream is chocolate.
For real. What makes it your favorite?
It just really tastes good, Siri.
What does it refer to?
Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
All right, so that's, it's a little rough, but it's a very cool thing, this assistant extension thing. So, anyways, so, check it out if you're into jailbreaking. There are various Siri plugins. You can also launch apps using this plugin or jailbreak hack to Siri. You can also send tweets directly by just saying send tweet. So it's very cool. and makes Siri even more fun than it is from what Apple has done. Now, I think Apple's looking at all this jailbreaks tweaks to Siri and is going to end up incorporating a lot of it. So it's very cool. Okay, so that's it for episode 105 of the Apple Podcast. This is Lex at MaxFuture.com. Thanks for listening. Today is February 11th, 2012. Remember, it's a chit-chat-free podcast. Your support would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and see you next week.
This has been a Max Future production.